An all-American girl vanishes from a Caribbean cruise liner.
Somebody saw her, somebody wanted her, and somebody took her.
Her parents' search for answers leads them into unimaginable territory.
It was just horrible.
It wasn't the Amy that I know.
And a trail of witnesses uncover the unthinkable.
That's the girl I saw in Barbados.
I'm 100% sure right now, as I'm speaking, that she's alive.
Somebody knows what happened. One way or the other, somebody knows.
Beth Holloway ventures to Curacao to track the mysterious disappearance of Amy Bradley. Now, on Vanished.
2005, I got the call telling me that my daughter, Natalie, had vanished. Every parent's worst nightmare became my reality. I asked the world to help me. I found myself in an unimaginable fight. My search for answers gave me a new mission in life. Bring the missing home and criminals to justice. When a loved one goes missing in a foreign country, the feeling of pain and helplessness is unbearable. It's something I know about firsthand, as does this next family, whose own Caribbean vacation left them wondering if their daughter was the victim of an unspeakable crime.
Chesterfield, Virginia. Home to the Bradley family, Ron, Iva, Brad, and Amy.
Amy was born first and ran the show. Amy lettered in 5 sports in high school. Brad did the same thing.
Was Amy a take-charge sister?
Focused and a fireball and...
A lot like her mom.
Amy receives multiple college scholarship offers, but chooses the school closest to home. Amy and her brother, Brad, are especially close.
Brother, I'll always be there for you. I love you, little brother.
Hey!
By 1998, 23-year-old Amy has built a life of her own. She has a new apartment and is making plans to pursue a master's degree in sports psychology.
She seemed to be as happy as she could, and was very excited about everything at home and how things were going with her life at that point.
In early March, Amy's parents call with more exciting news. Her father's employer is sending the family on a 7-day Caribbean cruise. Surprisingly, Amy is reluctant to join them.
She was a little apprehensive about the big boat thing and about the ocean, even though she's a swim team coach and swam all her life.
Despite her fears, the opportunity to spend time with her family is one Amy can't pass up. On March 21, 1998, the Bradleys step aboard a 1,000-foot cruise liner and cast off from Puerto Rico.
So the day arrives, you board the ship, and you set sail.
I looked at them and thought, wow, how special, how great everybody looks and everybody's having a great time.
And that's what you're there for. Having a good time, enjoying yourself, relaxing, and what you should be doing.
On the morning of March 23rd, the ship drops anchor in Oranjestad, Aruba. The Bradleys mark the occasion with a family photo.
The wind's blowing and Amy's hair's standing straight up on her head, and we've got Brad and Ronnie in the background, and I'm just tickled to death.
After a day of exploring the island, Amy and her family return to the ship for dinner, followed by a calypso party on the upper deck.
There was music, and we did the limbo contest, which I won that night. You know, just having drinks, having a good time.
Around 1 a.m., the ship sets off for Curacao, a tiny island off the coast of Venezuela. Exhausted, Iva and Ron decide to call it a night. Amy and Brad head to the ship's 24-hour dance club to hear a performance by the house band.
We're just dancing, having a good time, until I got back to the room, I think around 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was sitting outside on the balcony, and I think it was around 4:15 or 4:30 that she came in and joined me on the balcony.
Shortly after that, Brad decides to call it a night. But Amy is still wide awake.
She said she was going to stay out on the balcony and get some fresh air, so told her I loved her and went inside.
5:30 a.m. As the ship arrives in Curacao, Ron Bradley wakes to find his daughter still on the balcony, relaxing.
Knowing that she was comfortable, I just decided to lay my head back down because I knew in about 20 minutes we were going to get up and go off on the island and have breakfast.
But when Ron wakes up again 20 minutes later, Amy is nowhere in sight.
Right away, I said, well, she must have gone up on the deck to take some pictures, drink some coffee. So I fully anticipated going out of the room and finding her up on deck.
But Amy is not on deck. All of her belongings are still in the room. Yet after searching the ship for more than an hour, Amy is nowhere to be found. Ron is starting to panic.
You know, where in the world is she? And I came back and told my wife that I can't find Amy, you need to get up and help me look.
What was your initial gut reaction when he told you that?
I'm immediately very, very, very upset and concerned because I took one look at him and he didn't even look like him. He was completely frantic.
Where is Amy Bradley? Passengers are preparing to spend the day in Curacao. Ron and Iva Bradley beg the crew not to let down the gangplank.
My wife was pleading not to let anyone off the ship. Please muster everyone to account for everyone and look over the ship, search the rooms, please find her.
The captain agrees to launch a search for Amy, but refuses to make an announcement or seal off the ship. Minutes later, the cruise liner opens its doors to the streets of Curacao.
Your thoughts must have just been racing with panic that Amy is nowhere to be found, and now the ship is just emptying out.
I said, there's about 3,000 people on here. There's 3,000 eyes and there's 3,000 ears. You've got to put out a picture. You've got to make an announcement that she's missing. We need help.
He said, we can't make an announcement like that. It will disturb the passengers.
For now, the Bradleys can only start searching the ship.
We went up and looked around the disco and all the different floors, and you realize it wasn't just an everyday situation.
I don't know how to describe the feeling. It was just helplessness and frantic at the same time.
5 p.m. The Bradleys have yet to find any sign of Amy. They've also been informed by the ship's captain that his search turned up nothing either.
He said, every nook and cranny of this ship has been searched. Your daughter is not on this ship.
Amy Bradley has vanished. When pressed by the Bradleys, the captain suggests Amy could have fallen overboard. The Bradleys are skeptical.
She wouldn't come near the rail, and never did in the first couple days of the cruise. I don't think that there's any chance she fell over accidentally.
But if Amy didn't fall overboard accidentally, what could have happened? Some members of the ship's crew suggest Amy might have jumped on purpose, committing suicide. Again, the Bradleys don't buy it.
Knowing the type of person that she is, and the fact that she had just graduated from college, had just gotten a new English Bulldog, which she'd always wanted. As far as jumping from the ship, just never been a possibility in my mind.
Another crew member suggests Amy might have disembarked in Curacao.
He suggested that Amy might be found on Curacao, that maybe we should leave the ship. And we said, well, maybe we should stay on the boat. And he said, well, if you stay on the boat and she ends up in Curacao, we can't get you off.
At 5:30 that evening, the Bradleys reluctantly step off the boat and into a foreign country.
How did you get off that ship? How did you do it?
The hardest thing I'd ever done. You just are kind of stunned and you leave.
In less than 4 hours, the ship will set sail for its next destination, with or without the Bradleys. The search for Amy is a race against the clock.
We're in a foreign country. We don't know what to do. We're trying to get in touch with authorities. We're trying to get in touch with the embassy. That was closed. It was complete chaos.
Amy's parents reach out to the FBI, but it will be at least 24 hours before agents can get to the island. As the ship prepares for departure, the Bradleys make the gut-wrenching decision to stay behind and continue searching for Amy.
And we sit there and watch the ship leave the island. One thing that we noticed, we knew exactly where our room was on the ship, and it was dark. All the other lights were on, and everybody was partying and having a good time, and there we were by ourselves.
Coming up, a shocking revelation yields a crucial lead and a prime suspect.
Amy turned slowly and walked into the disco, and he walked in behind her.
Five days into what should have been a dream vacation, the Bradley family is living a nightmare. Their daughter Amy has vanished from a cruise liner. After frantically combing the ship, the Bradleys disembark and search for Amy on the streets of Curacao.
We got off of the boat. I can't really tell you what was going on in those next few hours. We were distraught beyond even being able to explain it.
That's when Amy's mother, Iva, receives alarming news from the FBI. It turns out their decision to stay behind in Curacao might have been the wrong one.
They've been in contact with the boat, and actually there was not a thorough search on the boat. They searched the common areas, they searched the restrooms, but they did not search every nook and cranny.
Could Amy still be aboard the ship? Accompanied by a team of FBI agents, the Bradleys race to St. Thomas, the ship's next stop, and confront the captain.
I looked at the captain eyeball to eyeball, and I told him, I said, "You lied to us. You did not search this ship in its entirety." I said, "It would behoove you to let the FBI on here so we can find out who has Amy."
On March 26th, the FBI conducts an extensive search of the ship.
They did what they call a bomb search. And they had crew members walking around with Amy's picture folded up in their hand. They were looking here and they were looking there.
Meanwhile, Amy's family continues their own search.
So now you have rejoined the ship. What are some tips and leads that are coming to you guys?
We were just walking down the hallway, and these two college-age girls, they came screaming up to us, just frantic. "We saw Amy with a band member. We saw Amy, and we couldn't find you. Where have you been?" And we said, "Well, we just got back on the ship. What are you talking about?"
The girls claim that around 5:45 a.m., they saw Amy heading back to the ship's all-night dance club with the band's bass player, a Grenadian man by the name of Alistair Douglas.
They said they saw them come up the elevator, and then when the elevator door opened to the disco, she turned and they stepped into the disco.
So the very last person that Amy was known to be seen alive with is Alistair Douglas.
Yes, it's him.
Amy's brother Brad also recalls seeing her dancing with Douglas earlier, the night of her disappearance. More importantly, Brad recalls a strange encounter he had with Douglas the next morning.
He comes up to me, and the first thing he said was, he said, "Hey man, I'm sorry to hear about your sister."
Alistair Douglas's statement triggers alarm bells with the Bradleys, because at that time, the only people that knew Amy was missing were the captain and his security team.
That's the only people beside Brad that knew that we were looking for Amy.
The Bradleys report the incident to the FBI, and Alistair Douglas is brought in for questioning. Authorities want to know how he knew about Amy's disappearance, even though it was never announced. But Douglas changes his story and claims to know absolutely nothing about Amy's disappearance.
What are your next steps?
They brought a polygrapher on the ship, and they did a polygraph.
Ship security and law enforcement both question Douglas, but there is not enough evidence to detain him.
Wow. So you're thinking, he's it. I want to get to him because that is the person that's last known to be seen with my daughter alive. Do you get to him?
I never had anything personally to say to him. I was in another world. I was trying to just stay alive. Ron remembers sitting outside of the interview room, and he had to just about be restrained.
He came out with a thumbs up and kind of smiling like everything's cool. And it was all I could do to keep my composure at that time.
According to the Bradleys, the mystery surrounding Amy's disappearance deepens further when investigators discover that the ship's photo service, which snaps and sells pictures of all its passengers, has somehow lost every photo of Amy.
So all of your daughter's pictures are missing.
Her pictures were missing about 9 to 10 hours before she disappeared.
Out of everyone on that ship, her pictures were the only ones missing.
The Bradleys attempt to find out who removed the photos, to no avail. Between the missing photos and the suspicious behavior of Douglas, there is growing concern that Amy's disappearance might be related to some sort of kidnapping conspiracy.
My intuition as a mother, somebody's got her. Somebody saw her, somebody wanted her, and somebody took her.
Despite searching the ship and interviewing several crew members, the FBI doesn't have the necessary evidence to charge anyone with kidnapping. On March 28th, the Bradleys' dream vacation ends in despair. They disembark the ship one final time and catch a flight back home.
I know it had to have been the hardest point in this entire nightmare for you to leave that ship without your daughter.
Had I known that, Beth, we would have not taken our treasures on a trip because we came home without Amy.
You were absolutely robbed of any opportunity that you had as her mother and as her father to determine her last known whereabouts.
Despite their heartbreak, the Bradleys refuse to give up and launch a campaign to bring nationwide awareness to Amy's case.
It's a dream vacation that turned into a nightmare for Iva and Ron Bradley.
We hit the ground running pretty quickly after we got back. It would have been much easier to come home and just crawl in the bed, but that's not how we are. I said, let me tell you what, Amy is counting on us.
The Bradleys also announce a $200,000 reward to anyone with information leading to Amy's safe return. But despite the media attention and the hefty reward, 4 weeks pass without any new developments. On April 21st, Brad and Ron decide to return to Curacao to search for Amy once again.
We went down to hand out flyers all over the island, and we rented a vehicle and just went all over the place.
Within 24 hours, Ron and Brad receive a critical tip. A taxi driver recognizes Amy from the flyer and tells them he saw her the morning she vanished.
He walked up to us and pulled us aside and told us that he wanted us to know that Amy was on that island.
According to the driver, Amy approached his cab just minutes after the cruise ship docked on the island.
He was waiting at the ship where people got off, and he said she came up kind of frantic, acting, and asked where the telephone was. He said, "I'll never forget her green eyes." She has green eyes.
It seems the Bradleys finally have the break they are looking for. With the help of local police, Ron and Brad scour the tiny island for any trace of Amy.
It was a crazy search. They were looking in huts and going in the water and crawling up on the back of boats.
We were just looking for her, looking for any clues, anything.
Then, 4 days into their search, Brad hears an eerily familiar voice.
I heard Amy call my name. Pretty distinctive growing up my whole life with the way that she would say my name and call me.
The voice seems to be coming from a passing van.
So we kind of whipped a U-turn and followed the car that we thought it came from back in all these neighborhoods and little side roads and things.
Eventually, Ron and Brad catch up to the van.
And we got up to him and just some guy, by himself in the van. So either, we obviously followed the wrong car or heard what I wanted to hear. I don't know, but that was a little bit intense.
After nearly a week on the island, Ron and Brad return home empty-handed.
We just made a decision to come home because we had done everything that we could think of.
Coming up, before Ron and Brad even get home, authorities in Curacao uncover a gruesome piece of evidence. One that could bring the search for Amy to a horrific conclusion.
They had found a body.
It's been 4 weeks since Amy Bradley vanished from the deck of a Caribbean cruise ship. But after a frustrating week searching the island of Curacao, her father and brother return home, empty-handed, once again.
You're leaving and you're going home, and there's nothing else you can do there. I mean, you've done everything you can do. It was just horrible.
Despite the unthinkable horror of their situation, Ron and Iva refuse to give up.
There's not many people that knows how this feels.
You're gonna have me crying, Iva.
Even through the tears and being anxious and being upset, we have got to stay focused and positive.
But the Bradleys' darkest hour is yet to come. On their way back home, Ron and Brad lay over in Miami. While there, they receive some chilling news from Iva.
The harbor chief on Curacao had called our house and told her that they had found a body and said it was a female, had brown hair, and he thinks that it was probably Amy's.
It just had to have been just absolutely crushing to you.
I remember coming back into Chesterfield Airport. We were getting ready to land, and the wind was blowing about 40 miles an hour that day. And normally I'm not real crazy about flying, but that day, if it had gone down, it wouldn't have bothered me.
It will take investigators in Curacao 24 hours to ID the remains. The wait is excruciating.
I felt like we were about this big, and we didn't know what to do, where to go, how to handle things.
Finally, the phone rings. Though it's unclear whose remains authorities have found, they can tell it's not Amy.
What they found on the beach was not a female with brown hair. Actually, it was a male, and it was just a pelvic girdle and a piece of a spine that was determined to be for a man.
The Bradleys are relieved, but they are no closer to finding their daughter. Once again, they turn to the media for help.
It was just a constant thing from the time we got up in the morning until the time we went to bed at night, and it never stopped.
It's like a hole blown through you with a bunch of jagged edges. There is no closure until we find Amy.
May 1999. After watching a TV segment on Amy's case, a Canadian businessman by the name of David Carmichael calls the Bradleys with an astonishing lead. He also tells them he has no interest in their reward fund.
I'll never forget that day. I'll never forget it. He said, I have seen your daughter. I've absolutely seen your daughter.
According to Carmichael, the encounter took place while he was scuba diving in Curacao, some 5 months after Amy vanished.
We were over in a small area where we wash off the equipment in fresh water, and I looked down the beach and I saw a girl walking down the beach with being flanked by 2 people.
At first, Carmichael paid no attention to the 3 strangers. But then, the woman did something bizarre.
The minute she heard I spoke English, she picked up her pace and was putting distance between her and the 2 people that were flanking her. Within what was probably seconds, she was within 3 or 4 feet of me.
According to Carmichael, just as the young woman was about to speak, the 2 men caught up to her and pulled her into a nearby cafe. David decides to follow them.
Something went off in my brain to tell me, gather more information about this person.
David notices a scar on the woman's right shin, and she also seems to be pointing out several tattoos. She has a Tasmanian devil on her left shoulder blade. David's description is chilling.
The credibility is unquestionable.
This time, this could be it. This could really be Amy.
He described her to a T, to include her tattoo.
I was 2 feet away from her. 2 feet. That's how close I was. I don't even have to think about it. It's 100%. It's not 99, it's 100. It's 100%, it was her. It was.
If the woman on the beach was Amy, then who were the mysterious men with her?
It made us wonder what type of situation Amy was in and who had or who was controlling her.
The Bradleys contact local authorities, who search the area where the encounter allegedly took place. They find no sign of Amy. But Carmichael's tip does convince the Bradleys that Amy has been kidnapped.
It was just a confirmation of somebody's got her, because she was definitely under control. She was not walking on the beach under her own free will.
3 months later, another man comes forward with additional information that seems to prove, without a doubt, that Amy has been kidnapped. The man's name is Frank Jones. Jones is a private investigator who claims that Amy is being held captive and that her captors specialize in one of the Caribbean's darkest secrets, human trafficking.
People take a look at human trafficking and they go, that's crazy. Go on the internet and type in human trafficking in the United States alone. It will blow your mind.
The U.S. State Department estimates that more than 12 million people worldwide are the victims of human and sexual trafficking. And Frank Jones believes that Amy has been forced into sexual slavery. He also believes that if anyone can bring Amy home safely, he can.
This is a guy that presented himself as a special forces guy that's rescued people like this.
But according to Jones, operations like these take time and tens of thousands of dollars. The Bradleys are more than willing to pay.
He seemed to back up what he was saying. He was following Amy. He knew where she was. I say to myself, hey, if that's where she is, let's get this done. Maybe today's today.
When your daughter's missing, you're willing to do anything and spend any amount of money if you think it's going to help find her. So that's what we did.
Over the next year, Jones and his team of reconnaissance experts conduct operations in Curacao, staking out suspected brothels and drug dens, ultimately concluding Amy is still alive and is being held on the island. As evidence, they send the Bradleys surveillance photos.
Some of the shots were Amy's tattoo on her ankle. Another shot was her facing away and a tattoo on her shoulder. She stood like Amy. She was built like Amy. And so we thought it was Amy.
On September 22, 1999, Frank Jones informs the Bradleys that he's gathered enough intel to successfully extract Amy. But to do so, he'll need an additional $100,000. Ron Bradley borrows the money from his boss.
We were able to get the money together by our former employer, who said, hey, if that's where she is, let's get this done.
It seems the Bradleys are prepared to bring Amy home at last. Coming up, Beth Holloway ventures to Curacao to come to grips with a staggering turn of events that tests the Bradley family like never before.
There were some pretty evil things that happened.
Two years after Amy Bradley vanished from a cruise liner, her family seems to be closing in on the truth. Former Special Forces officer Frank Jones and his reconnaissance team are convinced Amy is being held against her will on the Caribbean island of Curacao. But first, Jones needs a final payment of $100,000. The Bradleys' employer is willing to help out, but wants to make sure the tip is legitimate before he hands over the cash. So on November 1st, 2000, he sends a trusted source, security contractor Tim Buckholes, to Curacao in order to monitor Frank Jones and his team.
He's very kind, he's very gentle, but he's scary. He's the kind of guy that can go on an island or go anywhere in the world, and he just straight up says, I need to meet the criminal element here.
After just a few hours on the island, Buckholes contacts the Bradleys with some heartbreaking news.
He called us saying that Frank Jones is down here drinking rum and having a good time, and with absolutely nothing going on concerning Amy.
Tim has also discovered that Frank Jones is not the former Special Forces operative he claims to be. Jones is a con artist, and that the alleged photos of Amy are phony as well.
He had gotten copies of that tattoo from us that he took to a tattoo parlor, and they did a stencil and put it on this girl. And they posed her on the beach as Amy in order to get some additional funding.
How much money had Iva given to Frank?
Frank had actually taken over $200,000 from that family. And it wasn't the family's money, it was donations, and everybody that was given donations to help find Amy.
In February 2002, Frank Jones is arrested in Virginia and charged with mail fraud. He is sentenced to 5 years in prison and ordered to repay every penny he conned from the Bradleys. But what the Bradleys can't recoup is the time they've wasted on this bogus investigation.
Frank Jones stole 2 years of our ability to be able to do the legitimate things that we needed to do to find Amy. I think about it at this point and I get so angry over the amount of time that we lost.
But while the Bradleys are trying to jumpstart the search for Amy, another lead comes in. This time from a sailor stationed on Curacao.
A Navy officer went into a brothel and a girl approached him.
And she leaned in and said, "My name is Amy Bradley and I need help." And he said, "Well, you know, what kind of help do you need?" And she says, "I need help, I can't get out." And then somebody motioned her away.
The details of the sailor's story are strikingly similar to those of David Carmichael, the Canadian scuba diver who encountered Amy 3 years prior. Because the sailor wasn't supposed to be inside the brothel, he waited more than 2 years to come forward.
Since then, that brothel has been burned down. It seems like that a lot of places on Curacao get burned down for whatever reason.
Though Amy's trail has once again grown cold, it now seems clear to the Bradleys that Amy has been forced into prostitution. But they are grateful that Amy is still alive.
You guys are such fighters to keep Amy's name, her face, the circumstances surrounding her disappearance in the forefront.
We can't let her down. And any parent will do whatever, as you well know, whatever you have to do to find your child.
4 more years pass without a single new lead in the case. But finally, in September 2005, the Bradleys receive a shocking tip. An anonymous source sends them photos he found online. The woman in the pictures bears a striking resemblance to Amy.
Could these possibly be Amy? Heavy makeup, kind of wild hair. My sister, the artist, first thing she does is she takes the picture. She said, "Squint your eyes at that picture and see what you see." And Beth, when I squinted, it was like, it just shocked me. It was just Amy.
Even more telling is the fact that the pictures were pulled from an adult website based in the Caribbean, and the young woman is being advertised as a female escort. After droves of false leads and dashed hopes, the Bradleys want to be 100% sure it's really Amy.
We got in touch with a forensic detective in one of the police departments, and he took those pictures and he took Amy's pictures and he did overlays.
The forensic detective determines that facial structure, hairline, and multiple ear piercings make the girl in the photo a perfect match for Amy.
He gave us the complete breakdown on it, and he said, "I will tell you that I will bet my career that this is Amy."
Investigators begin tracing the IP address of the website hosting the pictures. Coming up, just as they're honing in on the source of the photos, another woman's terrifying encounter strikes a new level of fear in the Bradleys and drastically alters the course of the investigation.
It had to have been just sheer panic.
It scared me to death. I thought, are they coming in to rob me or rape me? Or I didn't know what to do.
After nearly 8 years of false leads and multiple sightings, shocking photos have been found on a website advertising prostitutes in the Caribbean. The pictures seem to confirm that Ron and Iva Bradley's daughter, Amy, has been abducted and forced into sexual slavery.
When I first looked at the picture, It wasn't the Amy that I know. It wasn't the soft, kind, innocent Amy. The picture looks like a harsh and tormented Amy. And it's tough to look at.
Investigators are having trouble pinpointing the exact location of the website's IP address. Until that happens, they will be hard-pressed to move the case forward. But now that they're armed with recent photos of the woman they believe is their daughter, Ron and Iva turn to the media once again, confident someone, somewhere, will recognize Amy, who is now 31 years old.
Joining us now are her parents. Someone saw Amy and took Amy from that ship in some way.
In December 2005, the Bradleys' tireless efforts yield another breakthrough on the tiny island of Barbados. It involves an Ohio woman named Judy Maurer.
What took you to Barbados, Judy?
My husband and I went on a cruise. The ship docked in Barbados at Bridgetown, and we decided to go downtown and do some shopping.
While using a department store ladies' room, Judy finds herself trapped in a frightening situation.
I went into the stall. As soon as I got into the stall and sat down, I heard somebody coming into the restroom, and I heard men's voices. My automatic response was to hide because I was afraid they came in to rob me or, rape me or something. I didn't know what was going on.
Gripped with fear, Judy listens as one of the men makes a threatening statement to someone.
He must have said 5 or 6 times, "The deal's at 11 o'clock, and you better be ready to go." He goes, "And I'm warning you, you better cooperate. This is my deal, and you better not mess it up." And he just kept saying that.
You had to have been just trembling.
I was petrified. I was practically holding my breath because I'm thinking, I'm witnessing something that I shouldn't be witnessing.
Then, as quickly as they enter the restroom, the men leave. But Judy Maurer is still not alone. Cowering by the sink is a young woman who appears to be in her early 30s.
She looked like she's about ready to cry. So I tried to talk to her because I could see that she was just really distraught. So I said, "Well, where are you from?" And she talked so softly that I could barely hear her, but at the time I thought she said Virginia.
What the woman told Judy next was unmistakable.
So then I says, "Well, what's your name?" And then real softly, she says, "Amy." And
what did you do when she said her name was Amy?
Well, I said, "Oh, my daughter's name is Amy." She got the most horrid look on her face. Her mouth flew open, and she did a pivot towards me and then starts walking towards me and getting in my space, like this. And she did that 3 times, like she was trying to get me to be quiet.
That instant, the men's voices reappeared outside the door.
I heard a pounding on the door real loud, and I could hear a man making noises. And then the door flew open about this far. And as soon as that happened, she kind of grimaced and just stood there like she was frozen.
Panicked, Judy bolts out of the bathroom and past 4 men waiting outside. She never sees the woman again, or at least for 9 months, when Judy comes across the most recent photos of Amy in an article about missing persons.
Judy, I mean, when you saw this young woman's face, did you instantly feel that is the young woman I saw?
I'm looking at this picture and I'm going, "Oh my God, that girl looks so familiar. I think that's the girl I saw in Barbados." And when I read it, I realized her name was Amy.
Judy ultimately contacts the Bradleys, who alert the FBI. Using Judy Maurer's eyewitness account, the feds create composite sketches of the woman and her alleged abductors.
That lead was absolutely phenomenal, lifted our hope, our spirit. I knew she was alive. I know she is alive.
But by the time detectives follow up with the department store, no one remembers seeing Amy or her captors.
We thought we had finally found her, and that wasn't the case. So it was just back to square one again.
"13 years have now passed, and there are still more questions than answers surrounding Amy Bradley's disappearance. Although Amy could be anywhere by now, private investigator Tim Buckholz believes that there are still answers to be found in Curacao.
Got a question for you. I'm looking for somebody. Remember this girl? Remember her?
Somebody knows what happened. One way or the other, somebody knows.
Tim believed that somebody could still be Alistair Douglas, the bass player aboard the cruise ship and the last person seen with Amy before she vanished. Douglas is believed to still be working and living in the Caribbean, and though there is no concrete evidence linking him to any crime, Tim Buchholz would like to ask him one simple question.
What happened to Amy that morning while the ship was docking into Curacao? That's the only question I want answered.
Until then, Tim and the Bradley family will continue searching the Caribbean for clues, hoping that one day Amy will come home.
I miss her when I'm washing dishes, when I'm taking a shower, when I'm working. She's my heart. She's absolutely my heart. She knows that we love her and that we will fight until the day we die to find her.
I know we still have hope, even though it may not be realistic.
I love you, little brother.
Hey!
We just can't give up looking. We just got to do what we have to do, as long as it takes.
Amy Bradley was last seen in Curacao in March 1998. She is 5 foot 6 inches tall with brown hair and green eyes. Amy also has 4 distinctive tattoos: a Tasmanian devil on her shoulder blade, a sun on her lower back, a Chinese symbol on her right ankle, and a gecko around her navel. Today, she would be 37 years old. If you have information about the disappearance of Amy Bradley, please go to mylifetime.com/vanished and click on the tips button.
Well, show me around your grounds, and I know that there have been a lot of things that you've been doing and keeping busy with in honor and tributes to Amy.
Over here, we've got this entire area from down the side, and we have a plaque for Amy's Garden. And the yard,
it says Amy's Garden. Oh.
It just uplifts us when it's all in bloom because it just feels so much like Amy.